Have you ever stopped to think about how massive, world-changing movements actually begin? You know, it's almost never some giant single event. It's usually something small, like dropping a single stone into a perfectly still lake. That one tiny action creates a ripple, and that ripple just expands outward, getting bigger and more powerful. Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a source that takes that exact idea and applies it to something incredibly important, our education system.
So let's start with this statement right here, because it's pretty much the foundation for everything we're about to explore. I mean, think about that for a second. The lifeline of a nation. That's a huge claim, isn't it? It means the classroom isn't just a room for learning facts and figures. It's the very heart of a healthy, thriving society. So, yeah, the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, so if education is the lifeline, how do we make it stronger? Well, the source lays out this really clear, really powerful chain reaction. And what's cool is it's not about fancy new policies or throwing tons of money at the problem. Nope, it's about a simple person-to-person transfer of empowerment. It all starts with the teachers. That empowerment then flows to their students, and from there, it builds a stronger nation. This is the blueprint we're going to unpack today.
To get this whole chain reaction going, we've got to look at the force that kicks it all off. And it all begins with a very specific vision, one that completely rethinks what it actually means to be a leader. And that's really the million-dollar question, right? I mean, a change this big doesn't just happen by accident. It has to be intentional. It needs a style of leadership that might look totally different from what we're used to seeing in our schools or even in our jobs. And here's the big shift in thinking. It's all about redefining what leadership is. We're moving away from that old school idea of having power over people, control, command, being the boss, and we're moving toward a new model, giving people the power to do great things themselves.
What's so great about this slide is how it just puts the two mindsets right next to each other. It's so clear. On one side, you've got the traditional view, where leadership is all about your title, your spot on the org chart. But this new vision, it flips that completely on its head. It's not about giving orders. It's about giving guidance, about serving others, and about lifting them up. So what exactly is empowering leadership? Well, think of it less like being a manager and more like being a gardener or maybe an architect. Your job isn't to tell the plants how to grow. Your job is to create the perfect conditions, the right soil, the right amount of sun, so they can thrive all on their own. It's about designing an environment where people feel free and safe to innovate and act with a real sense of purpose. All right, so now let's actually trace the path of that first ripple. According to this whole idea, the change doesn't start with new computers or different textbooks. It starts with a person standing at the front of the classroom. The entire process is built around the teacher. So how do you actually do it? How do you empower a teacher? The source points to these three key things. First, mentorship, giving them guidance and support. Second, professional training, so they can keep their skills sharp and up to date. And third, and this one is maybe the most important, autonomy. That's the freedom to make their own decisions in the classroom, the trust that they know what's best for their kids. And when you get those three things right, the result is huge. You don't just have an employee who's delivering a lesson plan. You end up with a skilled, confident professional who feels valued. And that's the kind of person who can truly inspire the next generation. Okay, so let's see how this momentum builds. That empowered teacher now becomes the source of the second ripple. This is the one that spreads out and reaches the students, completely transforming the vibe of the entire classroom. This just illustrates that cascade perfectly. An empowered teacher creates a totally new kind of environment. That environment then shifts the focus away from just listening and toward active learning and working together. And the end result? You get a student who isn't just a passive sponge for information, but someone who's an active, engaged partner in their own education. So what does this empowered student actually look like? Well, they're the ones with the courage to raise their hand and ask the tough questions. They're the ones who think for themselves instead of just memorizing answers. They take initiative, and you know what? They're not afraid to try something different, to go off the beaten path. And now we follow that ripple all the way out to its final destination. See, this isn't just about creating better students, it's about creating better citizens, people who will go out into the world and actually shape the future for all of us. And this is such a critical point. Students who come from this kind of environment, they don't just graduate and look for a job to fit into. They graduate with a drive to actively make their corner of the world better. They don't just fit in, they improve things. And this, right here, is the ultimate payoff.
This is what it's all for. The nation gets a new generation of creative problem solvers and innovators. But just as important, it gets kind-hearted citizens, people who understand collaboration and service and bring those values into their communities. You know, this whole explainer really brings us back to one big, fundamental question about what power even is. If it's not about having authority or being in a certain position, then what is it? Where does it really come from?
And here's the answer. It's so simple and so profound. True leadership, real power, it isn't about how much you can control or what you can accomplish yourself. It's all about what you can unlock in other people. It's about being the person who drops that first stone in the water, creating those ripples of empowerment that help everyone around you become the absolute finest version of themselves.